Hello, my name is Michael Ronn, and welcome to my session, Writing as Medicine, Healing Yourself and Your Readers. And I'm delighted to give a keynote at this year's Authortube Writing Conference 2025. Delighted to be here and grateful that you're joining me for this session. As I said before, the name of this talk is Writing as Medicine, Healing Yourself and Your Readers. And I really want this talk to be less advice, but more of a reminder of why we are doing this as writers. Why is it that we are sitting down in front of a blinking cursor and doing all of this? And my hope is that this will give you some medicine and give you some courage on those days when things are hard, because they will get hard. So first, a little bit about me. My name is Michael Ronn, and I go by 3 taglines. The first is Dad, because I'm a dad and a husband. I am also a YouTuber, so I have a YouTube channel called Author Level Up. You can check me out if you're interested, where I do writing advice and writing app tutorials and live streams and all that good stuff. And I'm also the author of over 100 books of science fiction, fantasy, and self-help books for writers. So I'm not somebody that talks and talks and talks about writing, but doesn't actually do it. I very much live the advice that I give, and that's why I hope that this talk will be valuable to you. Now, if you are really bold and courageous and you'd like to check out some of the work that I've written, you can check out my fiction at michaelleron.com and my nonfiction at authorlevelup.com. And that's enough about me. Now let's talk about the key points of today's talk and what we're going to cover. First, I want to talk about remembering the sacredness of writing. Now, when I use the word sacredness, I'm not going to get religious or spiritual, but there is a sacredness of writing that I think is important to always keep in mind when we're doing this. Second, I'm going to talk about applying writing as medicine as a way to not only heal yourself, but also heal your readers and affect change. And third, we're going to talk about what to do when things don't feel like they're going anywhere, when you're stuck energetically and maybe you're burned out, because that day comes for all of us. And I want to give you some tips on how to reconnect with your writing if you find yourself in that season of life. So first off, let's talk about remembering the sacredness of writing. And what I want you to remember, I just want you to think back. What is your cornerstone moment as a reader? What is that moment where you were reading a book and time stopped? So I'll share my cornerstone moment with you. This happened to me sometime around 2011-ish. I was reading a book. It was the collected short stories of Elizabeth Bowen. She's one of the great short story writers, one of my favorite writers. And I had a cup of tea on my coffee table, and I was sitting on my couch in my living room, and the sun was setting. And this is one of the few times in my life when I remember reading a book and time just stopped. Right. So I was deep into this story that I was reading. I think the story was Daffodils by Elizabeth Bowen. And I could see the story. I felt like I was in the room with the character. All of the sensory details were just hitting me hard, and I was just there. And at the same time, while I was enjoying this story, I was also like inside my own body, inside like my house in the living room, and I could hear the birds chirping through the trees. I remember the sunlight filtering through the leaves. I just remember like how quiet and how beautiful everything gets right around twilight. And I'm willing to bet that there have been times in your life as a reader when you have felt the same thing, when time just seemed to stop, when the very book that you're holding in your hands just happened to have exactly what you needed in your life at that time. Some books just hit you at the right time, right, as a reader. And so what I want you to think about, and I'm sure you can probably already think about it, is what is that cornerstone moment for you as a reader? And once you figure that out, now what I want you to realize and remember is that every person who picks up one of your books, every person who's a reader in this world has many of those cornerstone moments. Not all of those readers are going to have a cornerstone moment with you, but the ones who do will never forget it. And that's what I want you to remember about your cornerstone moment as a reader. As a writer, we often forget that. We forget that. We get so stuck in our plots and our characters, and then we gotta publish these darn books, and then we gotta market them, and then we just simply forget that what we're doing is publishing a book so that someone out there sitting on their couch at sunset can read your story and get lost. And hopefully, if you're doing it right, time will stop. Now, let's talk about writing. Let's talk about the cornerstone moment of being a writer. So we talked about being a reader and how that there's a certain sacredness about that. Now, with writing, it's a very similar thing. And I'm sure that you have had many moments in your writing life, even if you're an aspiring author, you've had moments where you think to yourself, wow, this is just amazing. This is exactly why I'm doing this. So I'll tell you a cornerstone moment that I have had as a writer. And this is one of many. But I remember I had just published my second book, and the night was young. It was like 8 p.m. and I wasn't going to go to bed until 2 a.m. And I had just finished formatting my second book, Theo and the Festival of Shadows. And I was done with it, and I was just kind of tired of looking at it. And I thought, you know what? Why don't I just start writing my third book? It's a great time to do it. I don't want to look at my second book anymore. I'm tired of it. So I opened up a file in Scrivener, and I started typing it away. And I started outlining, because this was back when I was outlining. But I remember when I was doing that, I was like, this is such an amazing thing. Like what an amazing life I have. Like, I've only sold like 5 books at this point. Like, I wasn't making I wasn't even making coffee money at that point. But it was like, wow, this is so amazing that I've published a book. I finished a second book, and here I am figuring out what my third book is going to look like. And I just remember feeling this great like warmth, like this great feeling of privilege and pride, and the realization that I'm able to do this. And I never forgot that. And so whenever I finish a book and I start a new book, I always remember that time. It's like, wow, I get to feel this again, right? Every time I start a new book, it's like, oh, here's that feeling again. I get to start this feeling again. And that's a cornerstone moment for me. So what is it for you? What is that time when you were sitting on a couch, or you're sitting at your writing desk, or you were sitting in a coffee shop, and you had that feeling of that flush feeling of warmth, like, wow, this is amazing. I'm a writer, right? I want you to remember that too, okay? Because we all have those cornerstone moments as writers. Now, I want you to think about your reading cornerstone, and then I want you to think about your writing cornerstone, and I want you to put them together. And when you put them together, that equals an unshakable foundation. So for me, when I am reading a book, reading for me is sacred as prayer. It's me completely forgetting about the world around me, focusing my attention on words and allowing those words to paint pictures in my mind. When I'm writing, I am writing to, hopefully, if I do my job right, evoke that same feeling in someone halfway across the world, probably, who I will never know, and they will probably never know me. Okay. That to me is a beautiful loop. But so that is an unshakable foundation for me. And I want you to think about your reading cornerstone and your writing cornerstone. And I want you to lay your unshakable foundation and sum it up in a sentence, put it on a Post-it note in front of your computer. And when you're staring at the blinking cursor at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're wondering why you're doing this, or you're tired of formatting that book, or you don't know what to write next, you have your unshakable foundation. A writer is somebody who always writes. You can always pick up the pen. There is no such thing as a game over, and you can always pick up where you left off, even if that time of leaving off might have been years from now. You can always pick up as if you never dropped the pen. So let's talk about your impact of what happens when you when you actually write, when you do this and you put your work out into the world. I've been fortunate to talk to a lot of writers, and almost invariably, we want to change the world. There are a few exceptions, but we want to change the world. We want to write this book that's going to go to the top of the New York Times bestseller list. It's going to let us quit our jobs, and we're going to be able to do all these cool things. And you know that movie that plays inside all of our heads at some point. But really, we're not in the business of changing the world. As writers, we are in the business of changing a reader's afternoon or a writer's evening. Just as Elizabeth Bowen stopped time for me when I was sitting on my couch at twilight, you too can stop time for somebody somewhere in the world who's picking up your book and reading it. And if you do that, that's how we change the world, right? Because you're giving someone something that they didn't have, something that they desperately needed that maybe they didn't know that they had, that they needed. So maybe your book gives somebody the courage to have a conversation that they've been dreading. Or maybe it just gives them the courage to get through their day. Or maybe they've had such a bad day at work and their boss has been such a jerk that they just needed to laugh, right? That's all they just needed to laugh. And they remember that. And that's the kind of thing that changes the world. We can have nobler aspirations if we want, but I think we have to be honest with ourselves about what we are signing up for when we do this. Focus on changing people's afternoons, and you will change a lot of things in this world. So now I want to talk about applying writing as medicine. All right. So why is writing medicine, right? Why do I say that? Because it has healing qualities. And I want to go through a few things that illustrate how should you choose to accept it and why writing can heal you. Let's say you're writing a novel and you end up writing a story about someone that you would have never thought about before. This person has a series of experiences that formed them that you don't know anything about, that you couldn't relate to, that you can't relate to. Writing is an exercise in empathy. It forces you to challenge assumptions that you have in order to learn more about your characters. And in doing that, it allows you to open your heart. Okay. Whether you're writing a sweet romance or you're writing about a supervillain who wants to take over the world, you are going to write characters who challenge you and who force you to see the world differently. And that forces readers to see the world differently if you do your job correctly. Now, writing also forces you to face your past. I happen to write about a lot of things that I know about, indirectly, things that have happened to me in my life. And I've always had a choice. Like I can write about things that make me feel good, or I can write about things that go deep into my shadow, that go deep into my past. And more often than not, I usually write about the dark stuff because it's more therapeutic. But yeah, you can write about the other stuff too. But it does force you to face things that bubble up in your life. Now, whether you choose to acknowledge those things that bubble up, that is entirely your journey. But it is there for you to do at any time if you choose. And that heals you. You know, when you face things that are scary and face things that maybe you haven't had the courage to face in the past, that changes you. And that does help you evolve. Now, writing also forces you to face your emotions. When you write a novel, there are going to be all sorts of emotions that end up in your novel. And learning how to face those emotions and learning how to deal with them yourself will teach you how to help your characters deal with them too. Now, writing also teaches you about the world. You may write a book in a place that you've never been to before. Well, writers, we love doing that, don't we? We create worlds where we've never been, or we just, because we want to learn something, we'll set a novel in a city we've never been to before, or maybe we've only been there once or twice. And it helps you learn about the world. And in learning about the world, that opens up your heart and helps you become more empathetic. Okay. Now, writing heals you. All of the above, all of that stuff, it heals you if you have the courage to do it. Writing restores you. Writing is something that you can always come to as a safe sanctuary, right? So a lot of people like to treat writing as a job. That's the one thing I don't do. with writing. I do not treat my writing as a job, because if you trade one job for another, then you're going to want to quit. Okay. Writing is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be something that you can come to when things are hard. And it's always that cool uncle or cool aunt that you go to their house and they give you lots of candy, and they take you to the zoo, and they take you all over the place, and then they return you to your parents all sugared up and stuff. Like make writing the cool uncle in your life. Don't make writing the angry teacher. And finally, writing is courageous. I happen to think that it's one of the most courageous things that you can do, honestly, because if you think about it, most people don't have good ways of processing their life experiences and their emotions. And when you don't process those things, they tend to come out of your life in other ways, in unexpected, unintended ways. But with writing, you have an opportunity to process and work through, and in many ways understand all of those crazy things that are going on in your head, all the crazy things that have happened to you in your life, all the beautiful things that have happened to you in your life. We're not writers because we're crazy. We're writers because we're chroniclers of life. Okay. And be courageous. That's why writing is medicine. This is the sort of thing that heals your soul. And I'm always reminded of the quote by Maya Angelou about courage. And that is that courage is the most important of the virtues, because without it, no other virtue can be practiced consistently. So I believe that when you're courageous, you give readers permission to be courageous too. They may see something in your book, or they see your character do something that says, oh, wow, I never thought of that. That's really brave. Maybe I should try that, right? And that, again, is how you change someone's afternoon, how you give them exactly what they need at the time that they need it. And, you're just not going to know about it, but that doesn't mean that you don't have an impact. So let's talk about the silent impact. As writers, we want that validation, don't we? We want the reviews. We want the fan mail. We want the people patting us on the back. And if we're lucky enough, we want the awards, that say, hey, you did it. You made a difference. Your book has had an impact. But the reality of being a writer in today's world, and honestly, it's been the reality of a writer forever, which is you don't always hear a thank you, right? Now, readers will thank you in other ways. They might share your book with a friend. They might drop off your book at a little library so somebody else can pick it up. I mean, there are all sorts of ways that readers can show their support without necessarily reaching out to you. Okay. Now, sometimes they will. Sometimes you will get that fan mail, and that will make your night. But you're not always going to get the fan mail. But no matter what, this is the important thing. Never doubt your impact. Just because you don't hear about it, that doesn't mean that your book isn't having some sort of impact on people who read it. Okay. That's really important. And that's hard to remember when we want our books to be super successful. We're focused on the marketing, and we want to see those sales numbers rise month after month after month. And maybe we're not seeing it rise at the level we want to. We think maybe our book isn't having an impact out there. Maybe no one cares. And that could not be further from the truth. The people who you impact the most probably will not tell you. And if you remember that, then it just makes it so much easier to keep going. So let's talk about keep going and the prospect of burnout. So every writer is going to have a time in their writing career where you just don't feel like you have anything left in you, or you just don't know how you're going to finish that story, or you can't think of anything else to write. We're all going to go through it. It's a newsflash. It's in a way, I think it's almost a rite of passage, and it's almost guaranteed. And so when you deal with burnout and you need to reconnect with your writing, I want to give you some tips and some things that will hopefully help you do that. And while they may not help you today, just remember that I said them, and hopefully they will. But first, let's talk about burnout. Burnout is what happens when you cannot physically or emotionally bring yourself to the page. A lot of people use burnout as a term synonymous with writer's block, but they're not the same thing. Writer's block is when you just don't know what to write next. Like you're staring at the blinking cursor. Maybe you could go one way, maybe you could go another way, or maybe you're just completely blanked out. But if you give it some time and you attack it a few different ways, you almost always come out of it. And it can last anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours to a few weeks to a few months, and in some severe cases, a few years. But at the end of the day, you can get out of it. Burnout is when you cannot physically bring yourself to the keyboard, when you just don't know what you're doing and you have completely lost the love for writing. And that it's not writer's block, it's existential. And every writer is going to face moments in their career when they don't know if they have anything left inside them. It's almost inevitable. I've talked to so many professional writers who've always told me, Michael, I honestly thought at that time in my life, I was finished. I was washed up. I had nothing left in me. I wrote a successful book or two, and I was appreciative of that, but I just didn't know what I was going to write next. And they were at their lowest moment, and then somehow they found a way through it, and then they wrote something that became even more successful. Right. So in some ways, I think that burnout is something that you should aspire to avoid as much as possible and minimize when it arrives. But when it does arrive, and for many of you it will, you also should treat it as a gift. Okay. And that gift is an invitation to reconnect with why writing is so important in your life. And if you think about it like that, then you'll think about it correctly and you'll find your way through and navigate it. So I want to offer you some tips on how to think about reconnecting with your writing. Maybe you're watching this right now and you are stuck. You are stuck energetically. You do not know what to write next. You are thinking about why you're doing this in the first place, and you just can't find the love. You can't find the joy. What do you do? Well, here are a few things that you can do. First, read. Reading as much as possible is, I think, one of the best antidotes to burnout, because it opens your mind and it exposes you to new ways of doing things, new ways of writing things, and also just connects with you emotionally and spiritually. So reading is the best thing you can do. If you read every day, you will be doing yourself a lifelong service. Also, write what you love. So if you're writing hockey romance, just because hockey romance is hot, there's going to come a day where you wake up and you don't want to write hockey romance anymore. Write the stories that light you up. Now, I'm not throwing any shade on hockey romance. I enjoy hockey romance, but I'm just using that as an example. Okay. Write what you love. Okay. Write the books that light you up, and to the best of your ability, write the books that you love that readers want to buy. And that is a match made in heaven. Okay. If you do that, that's going to help you in so many ways. And have fun with your writing. Dean Wesley Smith says that all the time. He said that to me many times. Just keep having fun with your writing, because I believe that if you have fun with your writing, readers can see it. They can feel it, right? You wouldn't want to buy a book from somebody who, if you ask them, what do you write? And then they say, oh, I write these crappy urban fantasy books that I'm not really crazy about. You wouldn't want to read their books, right? No, write books that you love. Okay. Also, whenever you get fan mail, save it in a file, keep it there so that when things get rough and you're wondering why you're doing this, you can read that fan mail, and it's just a great thing to do. Also, don't forget nature. I like to take long walks. I like to be out in nature as much as possible because it does help me clear my mind and reconnect with what's really important. Resting is also important. It's okay to take a break from your writing. Okay. Now, in this world where everybody says, no, you got to keep on going, man. You got to write as many books as you can. If you don't, people are going to forget about you and blah, blah, blah. Don't listen to that. If you need to take a break, take a break. Remember what I said earlier in this talk, in that there's no game over in writing. A writer is always somebody who writes. And in many ways, readers respect writers who take care of themselves and come back better than ever as well. Okay. Now, next thing is connect with friends and loved ones. I when I'm feeling down, I love to call my friends, love to call my family, and it's amazing what that does. I think there's some memes floating around on the internet about how all it takes is 8 minutes to completely change someone's mood when you call them. So just always have 8 minutes for your friends, and make sure you always have friends and loved ones who always have 8 minutes for you, and you'll be in a great position. And also find other hobbies. It makes your writing richer. So I happen to like music. I like video games, and I find that all of that informs my writing. And I always find myself inspired when I'm playing video games or listening to music. And that just helps me be more well-rounded as well. So do those things. This is just one of many things that you can do to reconnect with your writing, but don't be afraid to take a break if you need to do that. And you'll be able to come back to the blinking cursor better than ever. And so I want to leave you with a final reminder. This is the greatest time in the history of the world to be a writer. Now, I know that sounds like a bold claim, but let me back it up. Think about it. The amount of words in your junk drawer, the drawer that you're never going to publish, right? Because the words aren't good enough, or you were never able to finish the stories. Just do a fun exercise. Add all those words up. Okay. It might be, 100,000 words or 50,000 words. It doesn't really matter what the amount is. That's probably still more than writers in antiquity were able to write, right? We have the privilege to write as much as we want, whenever we want, about whatever we want, and we can publish it however we choose, whether it be with a publisher, if a publisher wants to take it, or as a self-published writer. We have more freedom than any other authors in the history of the world. We have more privilege than any other authors in the history of the world. And I really believe that previous generations of writers would be so envious of us. Just pick any of your favorite writers and just imagine yourself having a conversation with them and complaining about whatever it is that you're dealing with right now. I just cannot figure out how to get this villain from point A to point B in this book, and it's driving me crazy. And you know what I think? I think that your favorite writer would slap you around and say, what is your problem? Look at all of the opportunity you have, and you're complaining about that. Just write the damn book and be done with it. I just think about previous writers how unleashed they would have been to have the environment and the tools that we have to be able to publish books today. And so just never forget that. And how I've always taken it is that what we have is a privilege, but it's also a responsibility. And it's up to us to model how to live as writers in the 21st century for the next generations. So as a recap of today's talk, we talked about writing as medicine and how to heal yourself and heal your readers. We talked about remembering the sacredness of writing. We talked about how to apply writing as medicine. And we talked about how to reconnect with your writing when things get rough. And with that, I want to say thank you. And I am positive that if you follow the advice in this talk, you will have a writing career for as long as you want to have one. And you will also have a writing career that makes you proud and that makes your readers proud as well. And with that, I want to thank you for hanging out with me during this session. I hope that you enjoy the rest of the Authortube Writing Conference 2025. There are a lot of really great sessions teed up, and I know that you are in capable hands. I also want to thank the Authortube Writing Conference team for having me again this year. I really appreciate the invitation, and I know that you guys are going to have a great conference this year. So thanks for watching, and take care.
Perfect.